Okay, we're about to start. I see that people are logging in. Okay, so hello everyone, and welcome to today's Gala webinar. My name is Isabella Massardo, I'm content strategist here at Gala. Today's webinar is on international UX, and it is presented by Maria de Riba Diaz, Director of Strategic Accounts at Vistatech, and she will be in conversation with Miruna Parkirie, Localization Program Manager at Kudo, and Giulia Tarditi, Head of Global Experience at Qualtrics. Just few household rules. We will have a few minutes for the Q&A at the end of today's roundtable. Feel free to use the QA button to enter any questions you might have for our panelists. And I would like to invite you to do it throughout the presentation, throughout the conversation, as you think of them, because it helps if they don't come all at the end. If you're using the chat, please note that you can select who your message goes to. So if you select panelists and attendees to chat to other attendees, otherwise only the panelists and I get to see your greetings and your comments. You can also use the chat for any technical queries. I'll help you troubleshoot. So Maria, I'm leaving the virtual floor to you.
Thank you, Isa, and welcome everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending where you're joining us from today. I'm very, very happy to be here today to host this conversation with two powerhouses in the topic of international UX. It is a topic that I'm particularly passionate about because I believe that this is where the true value of our industry lies going forward. There's been many conversations kind of coming up and mushrooming and becoming more widespread around global customer experience, international user experience. In the past couple of years, everybody is looking for like the kind of the silver bullet, the gold standard, and we're far from that at this point. So that's something that we want to tackle today. First and foremost, we want to reflect on two real experiences, two real journeys in the quest for excellent international UX. And just as a note for everybody, throughout our conversation today, we're going to be using international UX sort of interchangeably with global customer experience. Global CX. I know that in many organizations, there's a very clear differentiation between the two, but just for the purposes of today, I think we will just use international UX, but actually refer to the whole kind of sphere. In terms of the retrospective that we decided to use today for this exercise is the Sailboat Retrospective. In an early conversation when we were kind of strategizing about what we wanted to kind of discuss and how we wanted to present it, Miruna made the suggestion, and I think it's fantastic. Typically used more for sort of sprints, but I think easily adaptable to today's conversation. It's very visual, and it has four kind of key elements. One is the land, so the goal or the objective that one set out to achieve. Then the wind, which is basically what helps us or helped us forward on that journey. The anchor as to what held us back. And the rocks or the reef, I think that's what we have on the particular image that we selected. It's kind of the future risks that lie ahead. So in addition to this Sailboat Retrospective, we also want to have a second part of this conversation, which will be, I consider it to be like a foundational discussion regarding what we need to do as an industry, who needs to be involved in the conversation, who do we need to get around the table to move the conversation around international UX from a sort of theoretical concept to a reality, like what actions need to happen, what technologies need to integrate, what workflows, and all of those good things. So I know different people in today's in this session are going to be at different stages in terms of their own journey, different levels of kind of exposure and experience with international UX, but please do share your thoughts, questions, ideas, own experience, be it in the Q&A or in the chat, and we will try to cover as much as possible in the Q&A. So now I would like to extend a very warm welcome to both Julia and Miruna. Thank you very much for joining us today. I'll start by introducing Miruna briefly. I know many people know Miruna already. She's been advocating international UX throughout her whole career. And she was the driving force behind the very successful localization efforts at Box in the Netherlands, where she lives. She is now building Kudo's first localization program that is supporting the global growth of the company. Miruna is also a fantastic colleague and volunteer with Women in Localization. She has been leading the chapter for quite some time in different roles and has built a fantastic community in the Netherlands that is supporting localization, just localization efforts and knowledge sharing. She's been recently appointed Geo Manager for the EMEA region, and in that role, she mentors and enables the success of different chapters in a number of different countries in that particular region. So thank you, Miruna, for joining us.
Thank you, Maria.
Something that not many people know about Miruna is that, and I need to actually get this right, is that she's always been fascinated by the work of detectives and criminal investigators. And now she's solving her own biggest mystery of how to successfully promote international UX. She does not exclude having to apply forensic science one day, whatever it takes, right? Excellent. Thank you, Miruna. Now, on the other side of this virtual room, we have Julia Tarditi, and thank you, Julia, so much for joining us today. Julia normally lives in the UK, in London, and she's currently away. So thank you for taking the time and the effort. So Julia defines herself as a CXO in the making, if I got that right. And her mission is to fill the gaps that current global CX practices, where they fall short. So the gaps that exist in global CX. She has been challenging traditional translation methodologies for quite some time. And I know most of you, or many of you, will recognize her as the winner of Process Innovation Challenge back in 2019, when we could all still get together. With the initiative called Goodbye Source Text, if I'm not mistaken, right, Julia? Julia is today head of global CX at Qualtrics, where she is building and shaping a center of excellence for global experience and localization. And the goal of her team is to deliver a personalized and superior user experience globally. So again, you're very welcome, Julia. And
thank you so much.
Thank you. Something that not many people know, again, is that Julia enjoys the odd glass of wine. And when she does have a glass of wine, her accent changes drastically, and everybody thinks that she is from South Africa. So I'm really looking forward to sharing a glass of wine with you.
Yes, I was about to say the same thing. I want to hear the South African accent.
Absolutely, absolutely. Very soon, hopefully. So let's dive right into the topic. First, I'm going to ask you, Julia, just in relation to your own journey and kind of your relationship with international UX. Has it always been there? Was there like a defining aha kind of light bulb moment where you went, oh no, this is the way, this is what we need to do, this is where we should be? Or was it kind of progressive? Or tell us a little bit about your journey.
I had a hunch, like a gut feeling very early on in my career that the translation practice as it was taught back then and sort of executed in companies that or embarking on global growth was not enough. I started out as a copywriter. And so when I went on to managing localization projects, I saw how different they were compared to how I used to write copy from scratch. And I thought, there must be something I can bring from the copywriting process into localization that could perhaps boost its impact and to something that goes beyond a language adaptation per se. But I knew that gut feelings are nothing without data. And so it took a good many years to get to where I'm now in my journey. And that's still very much evolving every day. I'm super lucky. I've got a rock star team with me at Qualtrics, and I learn from them every day. And I bet if we're going to have this conversation again in a couple of years' time, my perspective would have shifted again. Early on in my career, I thought, okay, perhaps how I get there to sort of international UX is by moving away from using translators to localized text and use just copywriters instead. And so for a number of years, I was really misguided. And it took me a while to understand that the problem it was not with the people, it was with the process and the enablement and the lack thereof. A lot is lost in translation between buyers of localization services and the people at the execution end of the spectrum. And I believe that's why we've been kept outside of the meeting room where a lot of stakeholders in the last 10 years have discussed more and more, international UX as a discipline in its own right, or UX as a discipline in its own right for sure. And the international angle has been kept to the side as if decisions made by whoever was leading on the UX front by looking and studying the English-speaking markets would apply identically to all of the other markets and needing no further customization or global eye insight. So my journey has definitely been, long, lots of ups and downs, and still very much in the middle of the journey. But it's been incredibly fascinating. I think there's more to it. There's definitely more to UX than we've been considering within the localization community. There is way more that we can contribute to that. And there's way more than UX professionals could learn from people in our roles. And so I hope I'm going to be able to keep learning and contributing to the field, and that maybe in a few years' time, international UX is going to be something that there's jobs in international UX, just like there's jobs in UX research and in content design right now, but they tend to be very separate from localization roles. And I think we're gonna have to build that bridge.
Fantastic. I love the journey, and I wholeheartedly agree with the quest to bring international UX up as a discipline. So Miruna, how has your own journey differed or been similar to Julia's?
I think that maybe I've been a little bit spoiled in a way. Not that it's easy, but when I landed in the localization industry many years after Julia, maybe I started, let's say, 5 years ago, and there were already a lot of ideas out there. There was a lot of talk about international UX, and there were a lot of people leaders in the localization industry pushing this agenda. So and I was exposed to these people either from afar, following them from afar, or I had the opportunity to work with them. And I was also very, very fortunate to start my career in an environment, in a startup, where I could work very, very closely with designers, with product managers, I was coming also myself from a customer success or client success role. And this is how in the same company, I migrated to localization. And I was able to create a narrative for myself along the lines of there must be more to this than just creating the content. And I realized, okay, we are all working on a product that we're trying to create for, 10 other locales. We're trying to market it there. So we need to look into more things than just the content and the language aspect. So it was fascinating for me to learn, to realize this for myself as a professional. And it has also pushed me to, learn about UX research, about UX first. Okay, what is it? How can I add this layer of UX to the work that I'm trying to do? Content design, research, technology, and how can we, create a narrative that makes sense. So, maybe, with ups and downs, my journey too, and there's still so much more that, we need to learn as an industry, and I need to learn, and just being here with you, it's I look forward to the conversation and to the questions at the end. We're here to learn, all of us, right? To share and to learn. And but for me, it's a love relationship. It gets me out of my comfort zone every day. It pushes me to be a constant seeker, and I think it's fascinating. And it's fascinating to see where the industry goes, the localization industry. That's
thank you.
That's
Thank you, Miruna.
Slightly different, but also similar in a way. So
absolutely, I think there's certainly the underlying realization, and I mean that as in we know that this is the way forward, and that bridge, that kind of very close intrinsic connection must exist. So tell me a little bit, Miruna. You talked about kind of you had educated yourself or learned in terms of the definition of UX and all of those things. When you were, or when, as we look at the retrospective, when you're thinking of your ultimate goal or the land that you're trying to achieve, that kind of panacea or international UX, how do you view, what's your vision for that goal, or what does land look like?
Yeah, the way I see it, so anything that we create in terms of products or any services that we offer, they need to be in line with the needs of all the audiences that we're trying to reach, regardless of the language spoken, the location, the culture they identify with. And therefore, it makes sense to me that we need to allocate the same attention and resources. So how do we get there, right? That's we want to get there and create experiences that really make sense. And we always talk in the localization industry about that soft spot, or that sweet spot, or I don't know. So it feels to me that sometimes we cheat ourselves, us as professionals, or the companies that we work with or for, or by expecting to deliver the same level of excitement in terms of experience if we don't allocate the same resources and the same attention. And if we should think about the definition that the father of UX, Don Norman, gives to user experience, UX encompasses all aspects of an end user's interaction with a company, its products, and its services. So international UX, which is UX in the context of creating experiences for a global audience, must go beyond content and language. So language is a layer, of user experience, but not the defining quality. So that is the goal that I envision for myself. So I might change my mind, I don't know, with more learnings, with more experiences, but when I think, we need equality and enablement and empowerment. So big words, but it's what we need. Now, in terms,
Yeah, go ahead. No, please go ahead.
Yeah, that's the, let's say, the high level goal. Now, in terms of, we should look at from an operational perspective, at company level. Well, there are many things that we need to put in place, right? We have the sub goals that we as localization professionals always fight for, right? Full integration of localization in the development process. In the product development process, enablement, we're constantly trying to get buy-in from our leaders in the company, like for C leadership. And we constantly try to enable ourselves as professionals by, driving our agenda from a place of better knowledge. So yeah, a lot of work to do.
Absolutely, it's certainly an ambitious goal, but that's what makes it worthwhile. Julia, tell us a little bit, is your vision of kind of your land, your goal, that kind of ultimate UX, IUX, similar, dissimilar, in what way?
To me, the goal is ultimately to ensure that everyone at the company has a new tool in the toolbox, this global lens, and that whatever they're doing, they ask themselves, they go like, hang on a minute, is what I'm doing global ready? And if it's not, having a framework and having the tools to ensure that it is, right? And knowing what to do about it, not just, for this to be lying with a specific team and be no one else's problem. I want this to be, not everyone's problem, but on everyone's agenda. And I think it needs to get a seat at the table at the C level for this to happen, right? To have ultimately a sponsor and perhaps an actual role if a company is serious about the global growth. And then on a more personal level, I always say, my dream is to disappear. My dream is for the stack of localizing experience to have been done so well that nobody would actually realize that experience was not created for them in the first place. And I think it can ultimately, the proof's in the pudding, and that proof is the global user not realizing that localization has ever taken place.
I love that. It's become invisible, which, in turn kind of ties back with what Mirona was saying about creating experiences that are just so relevant. They make sense for everyone in their own context, regardless of where they are in the world. Julia, I dare I say, further ahead in your journey, and kind of your maybe conversations or fights than other kind of localization professionals. What has helped you? What has kind of given you that wind in those conversations and throughout that journey?
3 things. Commitment, for sure. I think it's an uphill road, and you're gonna want it. If you don't really want it and believe in it, it's still very early days to start on this journey. The second is jargon. And as with every profession, and we localization folks are the same, right? You go to a conference and everybody talks about TMS and MTs, and like, if you think about, I think we need to be more welcoming and more sort of agnostic as to who participates in this conferences and events, and remove the jargon, right? So removing the jargon when I'd speak about what I was doing within the company, to evangelize and educate and speak their language, you know, the language of the people that I was trying to influence. Because I can't, you know, initially I was like, I'm so sad and angry they didn't include me in that meeting on, you know, designing the UX or something. And then I realized that it was me who was keeping me from being invited to these meetings because of the way I was speaking and the fact that I lacked, you know, the awareness of that field. So study, learn, so you can speak the same language. And then the third is data. I guess willingness to, you can't, a former manager once said to me, Julia, you can't change the world in a day. And I said, why not? Because then if it's a good change, the world is going to be better off having been changed, you know, soon enough. But the thing is, that way, there's going to be many skeptics and people who are like, I'm not convinced that this is the way to go. Whereas taking it slowly, you know, coming to terms with the fact that people are still doubtful, that people are still needing convincing that this is right, that international UX is a thing, that localization is not enough. And so small, data-driven, all of the numbers tracked, show that with more resources and a different approach, you know, numbers don't lie, results come in. And so iterate, then doing a bit bigger and a bit bigger. And sometimes, and that's a mistake I made, I thought, okay, I'm not ambitious enough if I start small. But actually it's the opposite, because I start small, I can control it. Like you do in lab, right? You can recreate lab conditions. And then as soon as you know that something works, and you iterate until it works, right? And then you scale. Yeah, so those three things, definitely: the commitment, the jargon, and the data.
Data, absolutely. And it's the second time I hear data in this conversation, so I think it's gonna keep coming up for sure. Miruna, what about your own journey? And I know you kind of came into this, you know, at a different stage perhaps of maturity in the industry. Tell us a little bit about what's helped you.
Very much in line with what Julia said. Definitely commitment, passion, and trusting the process, not giving up. You have to want it, and you have to believe in it, and you have to be yourself convinced that this is the right thing. So I generally in life, I believe you have to be very much convinced by what you're trying to drive, be it on a personal or professional level. And then, yeah, jargon. I think that learning to speak your peers' language is important. As Julia said, it's not enough to complain that you've not been included in a conversation. They'll include you, but then you have to be able to keep up. And because localization or international UX touches on so many areas of the business, you really need to know how to, you know, create conversations around a common theme. We are in a position where we have to educate ourselves constantly and continuously on different disciplines that impact our work and whose work we can impact. So I do think that we need to really dive deep in all sorts of other areas and disciplines. And something that I'm learning, maybe the hard way, is I think what Julia said is that it's okay to start small. It's not it's not problematic. I sometimes have a hard time taking a step back, and I want to achieve everything very quickly, and I tend to get frustrated, forgetting that this is an uphill battle. But you can start small, show the value, gather some successes. You know, the successes will also bring you allies. Allies are so important. Strategically, to position yourself, you need very strong allies. Yeah, I think it's very much in line, and of course the data aspect. You know, without the data, you can't prove, you can't show anything. You know, so I was working out the budget today. Fresh example, I was working out the budget today, and I was with our VP of marketing. She's like, "This is really not expensive." I said, "No, it's not what you were expecting, looking at your budget, and let's think of the ROI on this." And she's like, "Oh my God, Lorna." It's like, yeah, you see. So yeah, you have to learn about everything, use everything that is on your disposal, be everywhere, but be in an impactful manner. And that's the hard part, and that's what comes with learning and experience, but you need true grit.
Yeah. Learning to communicate, I think the jargon is a big thing. Learning to communicate in business terms, as opposed to, you know, some of our own little kind of quirky words and acronyms, and the things that would be important maybe at a more kind of traditional level. Miruna, tell me about the flip side of that coin. So obviously the grid, the kind of the data, the starting, you know, small and kind of, you know, testing and getting champions and allies has helped along. But what has held you back? What have been the anchors for you so far in your journey?
Well, I think that there are several elements here, you know. Companies that we work with or for don't always understand. They don't always want to set us up for success. And they come from a place of excitement. We want this is amazing. You know, we want to be everywhere, and we want to have it done right. But the expectation is that I think Julia already mentioned it, that we have to do it, you know, as one women show or one team shows, and then the magic will happen. So there's always this problem that they don't see the value. On the flip side of this, yeah, as localization specialists or localization people, we also need to do maybe more to position ourselves better, to know how to drive this agenda better. So that's also the learning experience I was mentioning. We also need to change mindsets. We have to see ourselves. For example, when you build the localization program or an international UX program, to put it in these terms, you need to lead it from a product management perspective. And that's not an easy thing to do. You know, first, it's not easy to see yourself as a product manager, because traditionally it's not how we see ourselves. I mean, I know a few leaders out there that have reached a stage where they see themselves like this or can position, but it's not something that is, in my opinion, and how the conversation is driven in the localization industry. So we also need to do more in order to present ourselves better and bring other, let's say, mechanisms to the table. So we get more in line with how leadership thinks, and then we will get the sponsorship that we need. And then, of course, to also, you know, bring the vendor side, be it language or technology vendors, into the conversation. We also need a shift in mindset there, and other resources, other, you know, ways of doing the work, our other ways of setting up processes, being more aligned with the conversations that happen on the buyer side, and also being more aligned in terms of workflow, strategy, etc. So I think those are maybe the things that hold us back. Very high level. We can go into the nitty-gritty, but yeah, that's how I've experienced it.
Great. And there, there's also, for every, I guess, challenge or blocker, there's an opportunity as well. And I know we're going to touch on those afterwards. Julia, tell us a little bit about your anchors again, maybe from a different perspective. You've had, lots of fights, different experiences. What has held you back so far in your journey?
I think we hold ourselves back first and foremost. I think it's easy to, like we said, it starts with the job description. It actually starts with the company thinking about what kind of resource do they need. So it starts there. The misunderstanding, the lack of education and awareness of the impact that international UX and localization can have in an organization, right? The misunderstanding starts there. So this is a huge thing that's holding us back, lack of awareness and understanding. It's very little awareness of what localization is. Like, it's perceived as something that's very technical and boring and purely operational rather than strategic. And it's like a cost item on your balance sheet. So it starts there, and therefore, then the job descriptions that you get out there look like they've been created 10 years ago, 15 years ago. They're still the same because they are created by people who don't do this for a living and are not at the level where they can understand the impact that it can bring. Those job descriptions almost never get signed off or written by people at the C-level, right? And so it's as if, oh, I'm not going to get involved. It's my reports. Who's going to try and figure out who do we need? And then what happens is people like us, then we look at the job descriptions out there and we're like, yeah, sure, I could do this. This is my excellence. Do I believe this is what is going to propel the company forward? No. Do I need a job? Yes. And so I'm going to take it. And then when you start, I think there's that phase where you're like, am I going to be the person that this company wants me to be, that they've seeked and looked out for? Or am I going to show this company what I could do, what more I could contribute? And I think we're always very wary of putting ourselves out there and sort of, because then you're really under the spotlight. If you say, I'm going to challenge what you think this could be, and so I held myself back a good few times. I think the biggest thing that holds us back is this, again, the lingo and this black box metrics that we keep discussing over and over again, as if, we say that localization is part of a strategy's global growth. But then what we talk about in the boardroom is, I've translated millions of words last month, and my turnaround time was 10% faster than last month. And we get obsessed about this. And I've seen people in conferences competing. How many millions of words did you do last quarter? And it's not, and as long as we keep the lingo on the operational side and we don't talk the numbers that the C-level folks want to hear, that are their bread and butter, we are holding ourselves back. And so I think we can't be angry that they do too.
Absolutely. And would you consider then that obviously a risk or a kind of a rock going forward, that if we don't change our discourse and how we, communicate, that we're going to continue in the same situation, that we're not going to be able to advance that international UX? Like, what do you view, I guess, the risks for this whole journey? Yeah.
I think if we don't change, the risk is that localization is going to be decentralized and sort of, the marketing manager is going to have a basic understanding of localization and is going to think they go and do it. And same for every product manager out there. And there's not going to be, because they think we don't speak their language. We don't understand their metrics. We don't know what they set out to achieve. And so they will reappropriate the right to do localization themselves with lack of central structure and ownership and voice and guidance and strategy. I'm afraid that's a very big risk.
Yeah, I would agree. Miro, now, how do you feel about the risks ahead?
Yeah, I feel that if we don't change, we'll continue doing webinars on how do I evangelize localization, and we'll have people spend half of their time doing that in their companies instead of focusing on actually driving the products that they're working on a global scale. And that's the risk for us as professionals if we do not pimp ourselves up. Apologies for the choice of word. So yeah, that is the biggest risk, that we'll continue talking about this and trying to find ways, but nothing will change. So I think it starts with us, with the localization professionals. Fortunately, unfortunately, we need to drive the change, the industry. So we really need to, as Julia said, we need to change the way we do the job, and the way we position ourselves, learn from, what's not working, buckle up, do it again. So yeah, I'm having maybe a bit of, I do understand the importance of education, right? Always to educate your stakeholders, etc. But this can't be one of your main tasks when you're a localization professional, right? So what we can do is to really accelerate our learnings and position ourselves more equally, with the people we want to have an impact on, and that we want to make them our sponsors. So the risk is that if we don't, if the industry as a whole doesn't, and yeah, I mean, we're talking here about user experience, right? I don't know if our users care about the amount of words. Our users care about the emotion that what they are looking at and reading and consuming creates, the utility. So yeah, I don't think that, and using this, continuing to use these arguments with whoever we are trying to make a case for in front of, is helping us. So there's a lot of work to do on our side.
So let's look at the work to do. Like, we're in a forum where, and I'm talking about Gala here today, where everybody in the industry is represented. So what needs to happen? We want to move forward from this, as you said, we will keep having webinars about evangelizing localization. We don't want that. We want to move forward, and we want action. So what needs to change, in your opinion? Who do we need to bring into the conversation and take some action from kind of the different spheres of the industry as a whole?
Everybody in the industry, right? As I said, it has to be, localization professionals on the buyer side, but then also our partners. Already, we should stop talking about our vendors, right? Partners, they are our partners. Let's think about, let's do working groups. Let's understand how we can make this shift, how we can educate each other, how we can help each other to, as an industry, to position ourselves better. And, exchange and come up with more innovative frameworks. And I do think that people that have been around for a while and have things to share and want to help, the younger generation need to pull them in, at a very young stage, so they're the future and can drive it from a different angle. So I think I don't have a clear answer. I'm very curious to also hear what the participants' suggestions are, but I'm eager to do working groups, to learn, and to teach from my experience and to understand how we can all pitch in. But I do think it all starts with more conversations, and there has been some progress, right? I do feel like the partners on the language and technology side are listening more to us. There's been some progress, and we come more and more to a common ground, which then also helps elevate ourselves as an industry as a whole. Yeah.
Julia, what are your thoughts in terms of what needs to happen? Who do we need to get around the table? Like we want to move this from the theoretical realm to reality. And I know you have gone a long way already, but in your opinion, who needs to move forward? What needs to happen?
I agree on the conversation. The conversations, I think we should share our best kept secrets and what worked and what didn't, right? Because together as a whole, we can move much faster by enabling this knowledge sharing and data sharing and knowledge transfer. I think we also need a tool. We need a software, we need something, right? So I think we don't need another TMS. And TMSs are great and we need them, but I think on the technology, on the language technology front, we need something new. And we need a tool that's not just about the language and the wording. We need the Figma of international UX, and it's out there. Someone please build it. And we need on the vendors side, and I love this comment that Miruna made about, they're not vendors, they're partners, right? So bring them to the table, give them a seat at the table and ask them, share the fights that we have internally and absolutely ask for the right information back. The narrative should stop being about cost per word and be way more about ROI, so that we internally could sell at a higher level. Because we can't go to the C-suite and talk about cost per word. It's just not going to cut it, right? We're going to keep pushing ourselves back and holding ourselves back. So we need that narrative. We need the LSPs to be on board, and we need the technology folks to be on board and build something that allows us to track the data, right? So if you think about, the number of times I had to ask BIs and BI teams to build dashboards that tracked data to show how does a German user use the product differently from an American user, and flesh that out and translate that into insights that could be used by product, by marketing, by ops. Why isn't there something out there? It'd be priceless that we could get off the shelf, plug in, and it's got the data tracking, the insights, and the action, next steps, sort of enablement in.
Thank you, Julia. I agree. And I think there was some comment or question in the chat just about how do you track? So it's from what you're saying, obviously there is no tool that kind of covers all of that. And it's more, just asking different people for different bits of information that we might need. So we do have a quick poll because we really want to bring this conversation, like we would love to have a practical, open, as Julia said, kind of a trade secret conversation of what has worked and hasn't worked, and help those who are interested in the industry to kind of move this forward from a technology perspective, from a language solutions provider, etc., to really, from an academic perspective as well, because we need to train the future international UX experts as well. So we just want to know who might be interested in participating, truly participating and sharing and interacting in a workshop type of session on this particular topic in the future. So if you can answer, we'll just take a look at the results in the next few seconds. Just we would love, from our perspective, we would love to, we're serious about moving this conversation forward. But it's obviously not down to the three of us only. And yeah, I think, Isa, if that's okay, maybe would you be able to share the results? I can't see. Perfect. Okay. Okay. Perfect. Okay. So we see that there's a lot. Okay. A lot of interest, not a lot of experience in the area, and hopefully today has given you a taste for two journeys, quite different but quite similar, I think, in the same in a way, and just a taste for what are kind of the key areas where one needs to focus and what has helped both Miruna and Julia on their journeys. Excellent. Okay, well, it's great to see that there's nobody not interested. So that's perfect. Thank you, Isa. I think we don't have questions in the Q&A, but I can see a good few actually on the chat and comments. So I'm gonna read a couple out loud if that's okay. And by all means, Miruna and Julia, just jump in. Let me see what we have. I know Alexandra, you mentioned ROI on localization is always hyper positive. Absolutely, cost should never be a blocker, and executives understand numbers well. So once you show the dynamics of localization costs clearly, you don't need to explain again. Luz was wondering, are there any resources out there about what makes UX global ready? Any best practices?
I haven't found any off the shelf. I think it's something that also is product specific, industry specific sometimes, but sometimes even product and feature specific, and needs to be discussed. I think it's a conversation that needs to be had, that every company needs to be had. Put the right people in a room and think about how do we make, what does global ready mean for us? And there's probably like a model, 3 serve stage, like crawl, walk, and run, right? And so what does the crawl look like for us, and the walk and the run? And so you can then define priorities and go from there and disseminate, ensure that every department has got this, and every department has defined what for them these 3 stages are, and have the tools to go and execute it, have budget items to go and execute it, dedicate some budget to make it happen. that's how, that's what worked for me. If anybody is aware of any resources, I'd love to hear.
Thank you, Julia. And I think on that vein, Lutz was also wondering, how do you measure UX success in other markets? Is it through surveys or a kind of a no news is good news approach? And I think we're kind of touching on that in terms of the BI efforts before.
I think you don't necessarily need new metrics. You just need to look at the existing metrics with a different lens, right? And so, for example, to look at the whatever rates you're tracking, whether it's a conversion rate on a screen, from, I don't know, like people who landed through fully signed up and verified, and look at those, on a language by language basis, on a country by country basis, and see what's changed. See what happens when you make a change. But I'm not sure you necessarily need new metrics. Now, that depends whether we're thinking quantitatively or qualitatively. Then, of course, you can look at more qualitative data and have ensured that user research has conducted research using not just English-speaking participants. Then you can have surveys about the experience. Although the moment you bring, I think it's very subtle. The moment you ask people specifically about language, that's what you need to avoid, because then you plant the seed of doubt, and they're like, oh yeah, maybe something was off, right? And then it's hard to gauge whether what was off was the language, the translations, the wording, or if it was the flow. Perhaps, a German user has called support from Düsseldorf, and something's gone wrong somewhere along the line of the experience journey. Perhaps the call center was in Ireland, and they heard the wrong sound that they didn't expect, and then they hang up because they thought it was in like a you're on hold sound. But if you do a mix of quantitative and qualitative data, and you analyze also the sort of free text field and the feedback that has come through, I think you could definitely, you would be in a better place to define, going forward. And I think you got to start somewhere, and then probably, like I said, it's very company specific. But after you've iterated a couple of times, you probably know what metrics you want to look out for.
Excellent. Thank you, Julia. Miruna, I saw you nodding, smiling at some point. What's your experience in the whole kind of area of metrics and kind of measuring? And I know that we literally have about 1 minute before Isabella tells us the time's up.
I'll keep it very short and say there's not much I can add. Julia, she wrote an article in 5 minutes. I think it's amazing. I will encourage her to write an article about this. I agree, I'm 100%. Research is very important in any shape or form. And I don't think that even asking how do you assess international UX, right? How do you measure? But the same way you would do it, right? For your English product, for your English UX, it's allocate the same resources, look at the same metrics, but as Julia said, from a different lens, you have to get into the nitty-gritty. Research is very, very important, and that's not an easy thing to get implemented into your program and into your, as part of an important part of what you're doing. But yeah, worth fighting for. And we're 1 minute beyond 6. So
yeah. Thank you, Miruna. I know there were a couple more thoughts actually. I know Paula just shared some thoughts, and I think also mentioned Revolutics as a potential tool. So again, I would encourage everybody to take a look at the recording. We'll see if there were any questions that were left unanswered. And I would encourage anybody who wants to continue this conversation, just reach out. Isabella, we will make sure to provide kind of contact details maybe with our with the recording.
Absolutely.
But I just want to thank Mirona and Julia very, very much for the conversations. I thoroughly enjoyed our prep and kind of our discussions before today. Thank you for wanting to drive the industry forward. Thank you for those fights that you fight on a daily basis. Very, very much appreciated. And I look forward to continuing this conversation.
Thank you so much. And if there's an appeal that I could make is, please, like, let's all, when we get the, you know, yet another job description and yet another role description, let's go back and say, this is not what we need, right? We can do more. This is not what you need. This is not what's going to change your business. That's not what's going to be a force for good within your organization. Let's keep saying that, and someone's going to hear it sooner or later.
Amen.
We'll leave you with that thought. Thank you very much, Mirona and Julia. Take care, everybody, and thanks again for joining us.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you,
Bye.
Maria,
Bye.
Mirona, and Julia. See you at the next webinar next week with a sponsored webinar by Translation Back Office on the opportunities in the African region. So join us then. Have a good evening or a good day.
Thank you so much.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you, everybody. Bye-bye.